Hi there, my name is Kyle Yoder. I am the Associate Research Director here at CEIR, the Center for Election Innovation and Research. And I'm excited to talk to you today about how Virginia elections are run and how we know that they are secure, transparent, accessible for the benefit of voters, the public, and anyone who's interested. I'm going to be talking to you today from July of 2026. So I'm going to be talking today both about the primary that's coming up here in August, as well as the general election later this year in November. This presentation will include information about both so that you can compare, contrast, and understand what you need to in order to tell voters, tell the public, or cast a ballot yourself about how you can cast a vote in elections here in Virginia. Just as a roadmap for this discussion, we're going to start by talking about who runs elections in Virginia, what voters need to know in order to cast their vote, what voters need to know to trust the count in Virginia, as well as sharing some resources to learn more. And so to dive right into things, who runs elections in Virginia? At the state level, you have the State Commissioner of Elections and the Department of Elections. They also have a state board of elections in the state of Virginia. And at the local level, each county or independent city has an electoral board and general registrar. In most localities, the electoral board appoints the general registrar to make most day in and day out decisions. And in any event, that's who voters should be going to with questions about how to cast the ballot in their area, how to register to vote, anything about elections in their communities. So just to give you that quick view for anyone who's not familiar with the state of Virginia, I mentioned counties and independent cities. That is the level of government that runs elections in the state of Virginia. There are 95 counties in the state, 38 independent cities. For the purposes of elections, those independent cities are essentially equivalent to county governments. Each of those entities, counties and independent cities, has a general registrar who can answer voter questions. Voters can find theirs at the link that you see here at the bottom of the screen. So let's talk about what voters need to know in order to cast their vote, what those questions are that they might have for their general registrar. There are two main dates to know about coming up here in 2026. There's the primary election coming up on August 4th. That's special this year. That's different this year. This was changed from June to August in 2026 only in order to make space for the special election earlier this spring. So this year, 2026, Tuesday, August 4th, is the primary election in Virginia. Voters interested in voting by mail can request their mail ballot as late as July 24th in order to vote in that August 4th election. And of course, the state has early voting, which is ongoing at the time of recording. It started on June 19th statewide and continues until August 1st. We're going to talk about all of those options, but just to quickly cover dates for the general election. Tuesday, November 3rd, that's the date nationwide for the fall general election this year. Mail ballots can be requested in Virginia before that election as late as October 23rd. And voters in Virginia have early in-person voting options between September 18th and October 31st. Let's talk about who's going to be on the ballot for these two elections. So for both elections, voters in Virginia should expect to see federal offices, including races for U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives, as well as various local races on the ballot in both the primary and general election. In November, the general election also has a few additional races that will be on the ballot, including 3 statewide ballot questions, I know these as referenda, as well as some special elections and some local school board races that will appear only on the general election ballot this fall. Again, if voters have questions about who's going to appear on their ballot, they should reach out to their local general registrar to find out more about ballot in their jurisdiction, where they live in their community. Let's talk about voter registration in the state of Virginia. So the last day to register in advance before the primary election is July 24th. Again, that primary election date, August 4th, last day to register in advance, July 24th. Similar situation for the November general. That general election date, November 3rd, last day to register in advance before that November general is October 23rd. However, for both the primary and the general, voters in Virginia have the option to use same-day registration. In same-day registration, voters can go register to vote and cast a ballot at the same time, either during early in-person voting or on election day. So those dates are on screen for you now. For the primary, Same-day registration is available between July 25th and October 1st, as well as on primary election day, again, August 4th. And then for the general election, same-day registration is available on October 24th through October 31st, as well as on general election day, again, November 3rd. Voters can check their registration and register online, update their registration if they've moved, make any other updates that might need to happen at the link that you see on the screen at the bottom of the slide. And everyone should take a moment here just to check their registration, make sure that the address is their current address, especially if they move. If you've gotten married and changed your name or changed your name for any other reason, you should check to make sure that it's most up to date. All of that good stuff you can find at the link you see at the bottom of the slide. Just to put all of that in context nationwide, Virginia is one of the green states on this map. This map comes from a report that we have on our website. You can see it at the bottom of this page, comparing registration methods that are available across the 50 states and Washington, D.C. Green states here have all of the methods that we have measured available to voters in that state. So Virginia voters enjoy online voter registration. They also enjoy a same-day voter registration option. We just talked about both of those. And in addition, in the background, Virginia has automatic voter registration. So anytime Virginia voters are interacting with the DMV or other eligible government agencies, that information is being sent to the elections office so that the elections office can keep everybody's voter registration up to date and accurate with whatever has going on in their life. Most recent life events are reflected in voter registration. Voters still take advantage of that link to double check, make sure that everything is up to date and that there aren't any errors or mistakes. But Virginia has all of these methods going on in tandem, working together to make sure that Virginia's voter file is as accurate and complete as it can be. If you're interested, this is not the only map that we have on this report. This is for 2026. We have created these maps for every major federal election year, every 2 years, going back to the year 2000. You can find that full report and see this change over time at the link at the bottom of this slide. One last thing before I move on from registration in Virginia. Virginia voters do not register by political party. So when you hear folks talking about Republicans voted this way, Democrats voted this way, these are based on inferences. These are based by looking at who in the voter file voted in which primary and what people say when they report how they lean on surveys. But Virginia voters do not register by political party. And Virginia is one of 19 states that has these kinds of open primaries. So voters affiliate with a political party by requesting that party's ballot in a partisan primary election. Again, just to say that when you hear folks talking about how Republicans voted, Democrats voted, what they're really talking about is folks who voted in the Republican primary, folks who voted in the Democratic primary. To be clear, who voters vote for is secret. Whether or not they voted, which primary they voted in, that is a matter of public record. And that is what's being referred to when we're talking about political parties in Virginia. Now let's talk about casting a ballot. This is from another report that we have, similar to the last map that I just showed you. This one's showing voting before Election Day and specifically options to vote before Election Day. So as you can see on this map, Virginia is in that sea of green. Virginia is one of over 30 states that provide both an option to vote early in person and an option to vote by mail to all voters, regardless of reason, without requiring an excuse. You can see, if you go to the link at the bottom of the screen, our larger report on this topic, where again, we have created these maps for every federal election year, every 2 years, going back to the year 2000, and you can see how these policy options have evolved and changed over time and see the expansion of the availability of options to vote before Election Day across the country. But the good news is for Virginia voters, they have options to vote in person on Election Day, options to vote in person early voting, and options to vote by mail, regardless of who they are or where they are in the state. They have options to vote in a way that makes sense for them. So let's talk about those options. Absentee voting by mail, again, is available to all registered voters in Virginia. In order to vote absentee by mail, voters must submit an absentee ballot application. They can do that by mail, email, fax, or in person. Any registered voter, regardless of reason, can apply to join the permanent absentee list, where they won't have to submit an application year in, year out to vote by mail. But you have to request to join that list. So to apply for your mail ballot and to include your request to join that list, regardless of whether whatever you would like to do as a voter in Virginia. The deadline for those materials is on screen now. Primary election, that deadline is July 24th, and for the general election, that deadline is October 23rd. Mail ballots, after you filled out your mail ballot and you're sending back that mail ballot in the state of Virginia, those mail ballots must be postmarked by election day and received in hand by the election office, received by noon up to 3 days after the election day. So we don't recommend waiting that long to mail your ballot back. If you are planning to vote by mail, we generally advise folks to send back their mail ballot at least a week in advance before the election, and if not, to go hand it in, drop it off in person. But if for any reason there's a delay with USPS, there's something that prevents it from getting back to the voter or to the elections office by election day, Virginia voters can still have their ballot counted if it is received by the election office up to 3 days after election day. So again, absentee ballots can also be returned in person. We do recommend, if the election is approaching, that voters take advantage of this option. They have until 7 p.m. on election day to return it in person to the general registrar or at any drop-off location in their community. They can learn more about all that at the link below. Let's talk about early voting in the state of Virginia. That, again, is available to all registered voters. For the primary election, the dates for early voting are June 19th through August 1st statewide. At the time of recording, early voting is going on for the primary election. Just as a quick note, jurisdictions that closed for Juneteenth on June 19th began early in-person voting the day before on June 18th. For the general election, those dates are September 18th through October 31st. For both the primary and the general, voters can cast their ballot at any early voting location in their city or county, and they can find those locations and hours to vote during early voting at the link at the bottom of the screen. Quick thing to note about early voting in the state of Virginia, that SB 438, which is now in effect statewide, required early in-person voting to be made available on the second and third Sunday before election day for both primary and general elections. So we provided those dates online. This is the first time that those Sundays have early voting in the state of Virginia. So voters have even more options to go cast their ballot on a weekend when they're less likely to have to be at work, or if they're not available those Sundays, on other days during the early voting period. Again, we've covered those dates on the previous slide. But at the end of the day, we do have an election day, and voting on election day is always an option. So primary election day, Tuesday, August 4th, general election day, Tuesday, November 3rd. On election day, voters must vote at their assigned polling location. During early voting, they could vote at any location available in their community, but on election day, they must vote at their assigned precinct. So they can look up those locations at this link that you see on screen. Statewide, those election day voting locations are going to be open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. and any voters in line at 7 p.m. will be able to cast a vote in the election. A couple of key legislative changes just to talk about before we move on, things that voters should be aware of. This first one, HB 640, eliminated the option for voters to challenge the right of another voter to cast a ballot in a polling place on election day, just to make it easier for folks to still cast their ballot. There is a mechanism by which challenges can still be made that's available, described in the legislation. HB 909 restricted firearms at polling places and other election-related localities, providing just a greater atmosphere of safety for everyone involved. And then HB 968 requires officials to count ballots using tabulators, not hand counting. This goes in effect statewide September 1st, 2026, and will be in place by the general election. Let's turn now to what voters need to know to trust the count in the state of Virginia. So, first things first, all voters must sign a legally binding statement swearing their eligibility to vote, including their citizenship when registering. This is true of every state for which registration is required, and is true here in Virginia. Election officials check records regularly, 365 days a year. This is an ongoing process. Check those records regularly for eligibility, and inactivation and removal of any ineligible voters. This is a process called list maintenance. It's prescribed in federal law. It's entirely above board, and it's constantly ongoing. Election officials are very vigilant about making sure that the lists and rolls are up to date and accurate. Election officials check voters' identity when they vote, whether by mail, in person, or on election day. Election officials are verifying your identity. They're asking for who you are. They're verifying your signature. They're making sure that ballots are cast by the individuals who say they're casting those ballots. And then audits after each election double check the count. This is true in many states across the country, including here in Virginia. Election officials are incredibly thorough, they are incredibly precise, and they are incredibly vigilant about making sure that everyone in the public can trust what they're saying when it comes to the count, and that everything is documented and can be further reviewed and verified after the fact. So let's talk about that documentation, that verification. In 2026, all Virginia votes will be cast on paper. This has been true for many years in the state of Virginia. It is also true of 98% of votes nationally. There's a paper record that can be audited, reviewed, studied by investigators, by election officials, by anybody who's interested in an official capacity to double check the work of election officials. This is true of 98% of votes nationally. The only exception to that rule is election offices in the state of Louisiana, and that state is taking steps to work towards this gold standard of paper ballot trails. Different counties use different machines across the state of Virginia. When I say counties here, I also including independent cities in that. Some are using hand-marked paper ballots, some are using BMDs. All are doing so in accordance with state law. All are producing a paper ballot of record checks, recounts, and audits. If you're interested in learning more about this, I highly recommend our peer organization, Verified Voting. The researchers over there have put together this really good tool tracking and analyzing the different machines that are being used in different jurisdictions across the country. So highly recommend their work. I want to talk now about pre-processing of mail ballots. Election officials verify the voter identity of every mail ballot they receive before they count it. General registrars begin verifying that voter identity as soon as they receive the ballot. In Virginia, that looks like taking a look at the signature that's on the ballot, matching it to the signature on record, confirming that the ballot came from the voter that it's supposed to have come from. That's all starts before election day, so that ballot scanning can start. Again, this is just part of pre-processing. This is getting the ballots ready to be counted on election day. No results are released before election day. Nothing is shared publicly before election day. No ballots are counted until that process starts on election day. If officials need any more information to confirm a voter's identity, they can notify that voter and provide it through a process called ballot cure. This cure process in the state of Virginia applies to any ballots that are received by election officials by the Friday before election day. So if you get your ballot in and there's something wrong with your signature, or there's some other reason that election officials are not able to confirm that the ballot came from you, they will reach out to you, and you as the voter have the opportunity to come in, correct the record, make sure that your vote is counted. Again, this is all being done in the service of checking the security of those mail ballots, making sure that they're coming from who they're saying are, and allowing election officials to continue processing those mail ballots and make sure that those counts can come up as soon as possible after election day. But let's talk about the time that it takes to count those votes, because it does take time, especially when you have as many races on the ballots as we talked about earlier. So local boards in Virginia have 10 days to canvass and certify official results. This 10 days, it gives them time to conduct ballot cure, to adjudicate ballots where it's not entirely certain what the voter intended. So they have bipartisan teams of individuals evaluate those ballots together and make sure that there's agreement about what voters intended. Reconciliation of any tallies, making sure any other routine checks and processes that are necessary to make sure that the counts are correct. The state then certifies official statewide results after all counties have reported, and recounts may take place after that certification. So again, the process takes time, but that is evidence of thoroughness, that is evidence of accuracy, that is evidence of trustworthiness, and voters in the general public should understand that election officials in Virginia are working hard to keep their elections secure, accessible, transparent, just like election officials in every state across the country. Sorry, my mouth got very dry in the middle of that. Almost done. Lastly, for any voters or members of the public who have any remaining doubts about elections here in the state of Virginia, highly encourage them to sign up to be a poll worker. You can learn firsthand how the process works. You can support your community in American democracy. Recruitment is always ongoing. You can sign up and learn more at the link on screen, whether you're wanting to know more about how Virginia elections work or just wanting to give back, support your community. Here's a link to do so. Highly recommend everybody do so. Lastly, if you want to learn more about any of the resources that we've talked about today, here are all the various official state resources in the state of Virginia, as well as resources on the CEIR website about the various topics that we've talked about today. You can find those at electioninnovation.org/research about any of the topics that we've talked about today, or many, many more when it comes to the ins and outs of election administration in Virginia and across the country. Thank you so much and have a great day. Don't hesitate to reach out with any questions.